98.1 FM. Good morning and welcome to Freshly Pressed. It is time to get into the papers and see what it's looking like this morning. We've got the analysts waiting already, and we've got you also waiting to get your thoughts on across to us on the WhatsApp platform on 0809 WhatsApp messages. Then you can race down to youtube.com/smooth 981 FM Lagos, subscribe to the channel, and then you're sure to leave your comments there or go back and see previous edition of Freshly Pressed. That's a big good morning to AB Bozimo.
Good morning, guys. Good morning on the first day of what might end up being a 15-minute strike. But it's great to be here with you and great to be here with all the wonderful listeners out there.
All right, thank you, AB, and welcome. Let's start off with the headline coming from Vanguard. Minimum wage, fuel, health, school, sports, banks, basically everything to be grounded as strike begins today.
Let's never underestimate the power and effectiveness of a well-organized labor strike. No one should underestimate the power. Indeed, even the government didn't underestimate it because in what I shall quote from the article, in a swift reaction, I want to say the word again, swift reaction. It has been months since the former minimum wage that was set by the former administration expired, April 18th. It has been some months since the beginning of the year, since they had 500 million naira to play around with, to have a discussion and drink lots of cups of tea and biscuits to decide what the new labor. And despite all that, in what seems to be a form of brinkmanship, we've come all the way to the end of May without the agreement. And so, finally, people like the Senate President, the Speaker of the House of Reps, the Secretary of the Government, the Chief of Staff to the President, the Minister coordinating the economy, and everybody all met last night, since there was absolutely no advance warning of this possibility. Finally, they thought it worthwhile to come to the table and have this conversation about stemming the strike. You see, it may not hit us directly, but by the time fuel stopped being moved around, people who have children who they ordinarily would take to school and back, when you cannot go and get an affidavit in court, when various banking functions are not available, then you can realize that labor is one of the primary things that drives the functioning economy. We know what the difference is a difference of hundreds of thousands of naira. Government is saying 60,000 is the ceiling of what they'll pay. Organized labor is saying they would not accept less than 494,000. So that's a vast gulf. Let's put it in real terms. At the time when 30,000 was set and the dollar was 700, what was that in dollars? If government even attempted to discuss a minimum wage based on an equivalency now, we could even say something. But government appears to living in a complete bubble where those in office are living an opulent lifestyle that I liken to the lives of the rich and famous, traveling worldwide, never having a stutter in their various allowances and ESTA codes and all that. And ordinary people are actually suffering in Nigeria. Every other person outside of those in government is suffering in Nigeria. So it always sounds funny to me, even, and I'm not in organized labor when they say there is no money. There is money. They have chosen to prioritize where that money goes and keep it in their hallowed circle. So I'll be the first to say the 494,000 is completely, wholly, and perfectly unrealistic, because organized labor also has to do with private sector. How many organizations have the means to pay 494,000? That's preposterous. But what government is doing, also by its body language, if we go back to that hackneyed term, doesn't suggest a government that knows that there are very important things. That I'll round up with this. If we want labor to feel that government is also experiencing what ordinary people are dealing with, I think the salaries of government and political employees should be benchmarked against the minimum wage. The highest paid government functionary should earn at most 20 times what the minimum wage is. At that point, we're all in the same boat. If your salary goes up and you allow, and I'm talking about total figures, not the one where you say your base salary is 3 naira, but your allowances are $3 million. No, your take home totally should be benchmarked 20 or 30 times or even 50 times against the minimum wage. Then we'll all be moving up with the tide. If the minimum wage goes up, you earn more. And how now let me go to labor, please. This is very important. Labor productivity is a major part of the ability to earn money. If labor is only focusing on the figure and not focusing on the factors of productivity, which include the necessary infrastructure, especially power, to make productivity competitive and make Nigerians have goods and services that we can consume internally and export, then they are also missing the mark. Yes, that minimum figure is important, but labor as a set of people should be saying, look, we want to compete with the best around the world. And until government shows us that their priority is not importing jeeps, but promoting production of jeeps and other things in Nigeria, labor has a point to make. So labor should also focus on making sure the environment in which labor can be at its best is also at the heart of these conversations and negotiations, not only the minimum wage.
Thanks, AB. As we drift on now to pick up the next headline, I'm looking for a plank that connects this next headline to the first labor and this next story from the Punch. And the words of James Carville, the chief strategist to former president of the US, Bill Clinton, once said in an interview, "It's the economy, stupid." And that's what he said. But let's link it up with this story where it talks about the Punch says inflation dropping, economy heading in the right direction. And this is the word of the finance minister. Is the economy right?
He spoke on a TV station, and he said, according to I didn't see the connection between the headline and the content of the story, because there everything suggested that inflation has kept going up. And in fact, food inflation is markedly higher than the general inflation. General inflation is 33.2, but food inflation is 40.1. That means if you bought a tom-tom for 100 naira last week or last year of measuring, you buy it for 140 naira. That is incredible. And that goes across so many other food items. And food, unfortunately or fortunately, is one of the fundamental ways you can measure your well-being. I talk about the looming nutritional crisis we are baking into our society. Children who are in their optimal learning years are not getting sufficient nutrition right now. They are baking in poor learning. And down the line, 10, 20 years from now, we'll have a generation that have suffered from poor nutrition. Never mind old fogies like us, we are finished growing. But the children especially are suffering. So the Minister of the Economy says he's saying some things, we've paid off certain things and all that. So in the Committee of Nations, we look good. I insist that it is possible to address those larger macroeconomic things and simultaneously, as in walking and chewing gum, ensure that the people in the country are not going through such painful processes. I think apart from the ruling class right now, most other Nigerians are in serious distress. And so he's given a headline about how we're moving in the right direction. I agree that policies have a lead-in period. Things don't happen instantly. You have a policy, it takes 3, 6, 9, maybe even 12 months to be effective. But honestly, they say the taste of a soup can be almost smelled by the preparation of the ingredients. The ingredients preparers right now do not seem to be on the ball. And I'm saying that because while you are striving for these macroeconomic things, you must put in place things that make ordinary Nigerians have a sense of hope. Let me tell you the biggest problem we're having. And it's ironic. We're talking about a president who's talked about renewed hope. honestly, right now, a lot of people are living in hopelessness. I'm not going to stutter. I'm not pretending. It feels hopeless. There is a gap, again, between what we see with multiple convoys of people, rich and famous, crossing the road and blocking the rest of people's lives, and what ordinary people are going through. So until that gap is bridged, it will not seem. And consumer confidence is very key to the sense of well-being of the people. It will not seem as if this headline is making sense to ordinary people.
All right, let's look at some of the messages coming through. Fidelis says, good morning to you all. I think the first thing that can be accepted is to increase the wage by 300% since everything was increased by that rate. If the government can make health, education, housing, and feeding affordable and increase the minimum wage by 100%, then it could have been accepted. But with inflation at close to 35, it's simply unreasonable. The government has failed Nigerians. And let's see, Francis from Ojo says, please, while the NLC are at the increments of minimum wages, they should also find a lasting solution to contract staff in private organizations and financial institutions using third-party recruiting firms to employ staff and pay them less than the minimum wages with huge workload as full staff. Aisha says, this strike is a good idea, but labor should focus on inflation and better quality of life and standards of living for Nigerians. My people, we have to sacrifice for a better Nigeria. People are suffering to buy bread at 1,000 naira and Gary at 4,000. We're a blessed land and we deserve better. Abbas says, someone in the meeting should have asked labor leaders how much they pay their domestic workers and if they can pay them what they are demanding. This minimum wage is being touted as that of the federal government alone. So what we want is a promise of a salary that cannot be paid by private sectors or even state governments that are struggling to even pay the 30,000 naira that is the minimum wage. Keep your messages coming. Would love to hear from you. 0809 444 981. And we're moving on to the next headline. This one comes from Punch. SIEC, Sarap demands transparency from governors. AB? All right. While we're waiting for AB's connection to come back, yes, indeed, Amas. Okay, welcome back, AB. We didn't hear you for a few seconds. Go ahead, please.
See, the state independent electrical zinc looks smaller. Okay, all right. Okay, am I back on? I hope I am. So the SIECs are those tasked within states for organizing things like the local government elections. And they have been allegedly used as tools of the governors to essentially put their lackeys in place as the heads of local government. So Serap is saying, look, we need to know more. This is particularly timely because right now the FG has a suit ongoing at the Supreme Court to completely make the local governments independent finally. And that is supposed to bring governance closer to the people. That would be 774 local governments in friendly competition with each other within the various states. And that should be a good thing because it should make sense to me to move from one local government to another if I feel I'm going to be promised better goods and services, where roads will be better maintained, there'll be better power connections and all the rest. So the governors thus far may, as I say, is alleged, but they have used the SIECs as a personal fiefdom to put their people in place. And Serap is saying, look, we need to know more so that we can actually calibrate our expectations. I think if you make the local governments independent, as they ought to be, according to the Constitution, the state electoral bodies typically have their head nominated by the governor. And so you might have an interesting dynamic there where the SIEC may still not be able to live out to its proper creed. But I agree, we need transparency in all spheres of governance, whether at the federal or the state, and even especially at the local government level. It's a good call, and I'm hoping that, unfortunately, in the past, Serap has made a lot of worthwhile requests, but how the government bodies respond to them does not seem to have been very confidence boosting, let's put it that way.
All right, you're still listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. We see your messages coming through. We'll take them shortly. And of course, more headlines to come. Stay with us.
SERAP is the hardest working organization legally in this country, but the government seems to keep ignoring them.
I wonder how they cope with the workload of cases. I see them challenge everywhere. I don't know how they keep pace with it. That's what baffles me.
Honestly. And then you have to think they're working on behalf of the people. What are we, the people, doing? Do we even attend hearings? Is there a way for us to be made aware so that if there's a hearing, can interested citizens even just go and be present? These are interesting things to think about.
Some of the things eventually that SERAP would pick up, most of us, why we let it go. I thought somebody would do it. And
I'm not hearing you. I'm not hearing you properly. Sorry.
Most times we expect SERAP to do this thing that we forget that
the sound has deteriorated. Let's go.
You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1 FM. We've still got some AD Bozimo here with us picking up the headlines. And of course, we've got you sending the messages. We see them piling, but let's go over to pick up on the Vanguard newspaper. The headline, Federal Government to deploy technology for surveillance of mining sites. That's what the Vanguard states here. And the man in the middle in the eye of the storm, Dr. Dele Alake, is here. Solid Minerals.
Yes, he's saying that apart from getting what they call mining marshals who were drawn from the NSCDC, they intend to have satellite surveillance of mining activity as in various parts of the country. I'm always a supporter of deploying technology to assist and enhance whatever other activities we're trying to do, because it's alleged that a lot of the murder and mayhem going on in some of the states, especially the gold-producing states like Zamfara, comes from illegal mining activities and, some of these gang wars over there. So I think it's a very good initiative and policy. I'd be interested, though, in knowing what systems, not the nitty-gritty, but what systems are contemplated, what the cost would be on the ongoing basis, because you could say this system is being deployed. If at the end of the day, it's costing more than the minerals you are trying to observe, would it be worth the money? But altogether, the banditry, kidnapping, and terrorism, which are unfortunately associated with the solid mineral sector, can be stemmed. At least you can now have strike forces that once something is going wrong, they can go there. Some of it is being done in forested areas, but one thing is that there's technology that can detect the presence of people doing the right or wrong thing, and you can still respond to it. I just think one of the best solutions to a lot of these crimes is ultimately resource control. If Zamfara people are in charge of their gold, trust me, it won't go far without being properly accounted for. So we keep, touching at the edges of the problem without hitting the spots, and that's unfortunate. But as a concept, I think is a great one.
All right, our next headline comes from Daily Trust. Detained DCP Kyari regains freedom.
He was detained after at least after some investigations, and the last thing we heard was a sting where he was seen having some conversations, and eventually he was remanded in jail. He's been there for 27 months. I understand that he lost his mom, and so he's been given a temporary court bail to go and mourn his mom. Here's the thing. I wonder whether these conditions are available for every single other person who is incarcerated legally for assorted family reasons. And if not, why not? And if not, why him? It's just very interesting to me. I completely empathize and sympathize with the person who has lost their mom. That's not the conversation. It's why is there a different standard of legal enforcement for him? What makes his particular loss tragic as it is, worthy of him being freed for 2 entire weeks, and then presumably he's going to go back. What happened to the other hundreds of thousands of people in detention when they lose their loved ones? So I worry when a thing like this is done, because it does look like all people are not equal in the eyes of the law, and that is not a tolerable situation. Again, I sympathize with him on the loss of his mom. That's certainly not anything anybody ever has any joy about. But why is he being given 2 weeks out to mourn his mother? I would like an answer to that. And why does that not apply to every single other person who suffers a loss when they're incarcerated?
Let's look at some of the messages that we have coming through.
Ajayi was photo from Magode Sherry says, the federal government has itself to blame for this labor strike. How on earth can a simple, straightforward issue like minimum wage take 1 year to decide, even with a full committee sitting on it? Government is just taking the masses for the ride. And that's what Ajayi Ogunlua said. And I've got Tony here from Ikeja saying, well, I beg, when Tinubu promised to pay workers a living wage, what was he thinking? That Akpabio would interpret his intentions to Ajero and Osifo, right? Well, that's Tony from the Kejas. And Daniel says, well, from Festac, well, AB has said it all. The disconnect between the government and its supporters from the harsh living realities of the average Nigerian is infuriating. Go the government hospitals and see how expensive simple drugs are now, or how a tomato is like 100 now, or a sachet water or pure water is 25 now, etc. Let the political class slash their salaries if they can't pay a living wage. Daniel from Festac. And Tajuddin Abbas from Alimo Show comes up saying, at AB, the headlines and their makers aren't making sense. Hunger is in town. That's what Tajuddin has to say. And Tayo has this one on for us. The coordinating minister said there is a committee in place. Nigeria can be on fire and our managers will insist on due process. Super Cup has been in detention for 27 months and his case hasn't been made headway. Judicial system, well done. Joseph Menye comes up with a message here from Silver State Ichigbo, Lagos, saying, this government is just self-centered. How can you say there's no cause without effect? All the policies over the 1 year in office is total disaster. But high inflation, hunger, unemployment, continual demolition of houses, economic meltdown. But you see elites and government officials on Jamboree pilgrimage on subsidy, buying SUV, it goes on. That's Yemi from Marina. I'll put this one in quickly before we get to the papers again. Marina says, please allow me to ask, if we go through the history, has there ever been a time we increased wages up to 100%? Furthermore, has there ever been a time we increased wages without experiencing some level of inflation? Why are we fighting the wrong battles? We should be focusing on how we best to increase the standard of living by reducing costs. God bless Nigeria. That's Yemi from Marina.
All right, let's go on to the next headline. This one is coming from The Nation. Reps committee to hold public hearing on 9 agricultural institutions today.
Did you hear that headline? To hold public hearing on ... There was no public hearing on the change of the national anthem. I just want to put that out there, because the normal process for something important, I'd imagine, is to have some form of engagement with the people. Now, we are trying to open brand new agricultural colleges and institutions. Great. May 1,000 flowers bloom. You cannot but love the idea of more institutions to enhance our potential to do agriculture. A country that has about 1 million square kilometers of land, 60-something% of that arable, has no excuse not to have food in surplus, not just to feed its inhabitants, but to feed the sub-region, feed the continent, and arguably feed the world. Now, have we thoroughly explored and exploited the IITA that exists and various other agricultural institutions. Again, this is nothing against having new ones, but I worry when we seem not to even focus on the existing infrastructure, if you want to call it, of agriculture research and want to create new ones. Again, it's great to have a network of them, all connected, all working towards the same goal of enhancing our agricultural productivity. But agriculture doesn't stand alone. What is happening with the roads, the feeder roads that get these things to the market? What is happening with the police that allegedly stop every single vehicle and take a handout from every single vehicle, thereby adding to the costs of the final product? What is happening to the bad roads that make trucks stay on the road and get things spoiled? What is happening to power, where you should be able to preserve and process products? So it's great. Yes, do have these public hearings on the 9 potentially new agricultural institutions, bring this agricultural knowledge closer to the people who are doing it. All I agree with. But surely you can do more with what already exists and enhance those further side by side with these new ones. I worry about how wasteful we seem to be as a nation. And that is what I object to. Let me see that IITA, there's some in the north, some in the... I grew up in Ahmadu Bello University. An entire part of the campus, Shika, is dedicated to agriculture, an entire sub-campus. There is so much that can be done. Kano said, all ye herders, bring yourselves to me in Kano. Yet we hear of this famous herder-farmer clash. It's not that, it's trespass and murder. So if we have some things in place, let's maximize those at the same time as we're looking for these new students. That's all I'm saying. But kudos, bring more people, make sure that they are self-sustaining, because agriculture can pay for itself. Let's not just have more letterheads that have to be paid for by government.
And our final paper this morning, as we breeze through the Daily Trust newspaper, over 107,000 passports uncollected in Nigeria. That's the Nigerian Immigration Service can tell us categorically.
Yes, they said that people have got their license, their passports processed, and they haven't come back. Sometimes people fill the wrong information, so they cannot even be contacted. You're supposed to fill in your phone number and your email. Some people don't do the right thing, and so they can't be contacted. But there are over 107,000, and just to enhance people's ability to pick it up, they're going to be opening on Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Surely, if you have paid that amount, upwards of 45.
All right, let's look at some of the messages that we have coming through. Zibby. All right, let's go on to the messages. Izehi says, so after budgeting $500 million for the federal government minimum wage committee, they could not come to an agreement on minimum wage. Anthony says, there's this perception that the ruling class has succeeded in creating among
Surely that passport would go and collect them.
And until that is corrected, no one, including the NLC, will believe them when they cry wolf, even when there's actually a wolf. These politicians should start showing good financial behavior to get that corrected. I hope the power providers aren't going on strike too, as that will be a shot in the foot because their colleagues won't enjoy homestay. Benga Akamu says, there's an ocean between what the least Nigerian gets paid against what public officials earn. They hide all their money in allowances. How do you justify buying cars of 160 million naira while someone earns 30,000 naira per month? We've heard so much about what the government will do in the mining sector. Let's see some action. Kiari, who should have been extradited to the US, is leaving prison to attend his mother's funeral. In a nutshell, that tells you all you need to know. Emeka says, let the satellites and technology be applied in tracking Boko Haram members. There are real lines that are daily being vandalized. Prince says, there was a public hearing on the national anthem, do not well publicized. The videos are on YouTube. I believe the Attorney General, a day before it was signed, said there will be wide consultations, but this didn't happen. Yinka Bolu says, maybe there was a public hearing on the national anthem. And let's see, Olumide says, I can never support raising the minimum wage. Just look at what's happening in California now with the increase in minimum wage for some categories of workers. how it's increased inflation and caused the loss of over 10,000 jobs. If everyone got 400,000 naira as minimum wage, the 1,000 naira bread will become 50,000. And then we'll be back complaining about inflation. Address the cost of living issues, not the salary figures itself. Yinka says salary increases should reflect inflationary effects. In Nigeria, the rate is set at 33%, but the federal government is proposing a 100% increase. While this sounds promising on paper, it may not be practical, and expectations must align with the reality on the ground. An almost 1,000% increase from the 30K minimum wage intended for the lowest skilled worker is excessive, and the unions are aware of this. If a worker currently earns 120,000 naira, sees their salary double to 240 naira, that is significant. 40,000, I beg your pardon. However, for the labor union to base their calculations on a family of 6 is irresponsible. Someone currently on 30,000 naira minimum wage has no business raising a family.
Well, that's
wow.
This morning on Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1 FM, and say thank you especially to AB Bozimo. Agree, disagree?
AB can't. AB,
I'm
can you hear us?
I'm hearing you, Zibby, not Omatseye, for whatever reason.
Okay, maybe Omas has done something.
Maybe Omatseye is sympathetic to the NLC strike.
Yeah.
I'm a Nigerian worker.
Well, technically, we all are Nigerian workers, but if we're not part of these unions, we don't get these benefits, do we?
I think the key thing is what one of the messages said. We must focus on the lowering the cost of living. For goodness sake, if NLC said we are going on strike because after 365 days, this government has not made a single refinery come on strike, I'd carry a placard. But they just appear to be navel-gazing at their minimum wage. It's not good enough. And it is preposterous to think of getting 494 for the absolute lowest paid worker. Preposterous. I said it. I didn't stutter.
All right. Well, thank you so much, AB, for being on the show with us. Agree, disagree?
Hit me up at AB Bozimo on all platforms. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but that's all. That's okay.
It's all right. We love you. That is it for Freshly Pressed this morning. Do stay with us. There is a lot more to come on the